So this week we are talking about Miss Marvel, the new show on Disney Plus from Marvel. Dave, what were your thoughts on this?
Initial thought, I enjoyed it. I think it felt probably the closest to a real show that any of these has, other than WandaVision. I thought that it did a really cool job of providing an honest look at a culture and family dynamic that I personally have not experienced. It felt honest to me, and as far as I can see online, it seems pretty accurate representation of the culture. And I always enjoy shows like that. I think of Fresh Off the Boat as an example
Hmm.
of a show that kind of gives like a look at another culture that is not my own. And when that is done respectfully and honestly, I think that is really cool to watch. And this had a certain amount of that. And I think those were my favorite parts of the show, to be honest. I think I liked all of that way better than I liked all the superhero stuff.
I felt like it was more of a Bollywood version of Smallville to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see where you're going with.
It had all the feels of Smallville with the caveat that she showed up in her superhero suit before the end of the series. I like how they kind of took a peek behind the curtain of a Pakistani slash Indian slash Muslim culture, and it was cool to see that. That was all definitely very interesting, and going into some of the history of that and interlacing that history with Marvel lore as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like I could have watched a sitcom about the family and just not even cared about any of the superhero stuff, like Fresh Off the Boat, which I love that show. And I think that they could have made a sitcom about this family and just done away with the powers and the Marvel tie-ins, and I think I would have liked that a lot. Yeah, those were my favorite parts of the show for sure.
While that is one of my favorite parts about it, that it was culturally interesting and very stylistically
Oh
different.
yeah, the style. Narratively, the show is from Kamala's perspective, and the style
Hmm.
that gets placed onto the show, being from her perspective, is really, really cool. I thought that was done really well.
Oh, definitely. It was really unique in a way that I haven't seen in a Marvel show.
Yeah, it felt very John Hughes to me.
Yeah, again, and I don't say this in a negative way, but again, in a like Bollywood John Hughes.
Sure.
One of the show's biggest attractors for me was, as we've been saying this whole time, was that it was very culturally accurate and very interesting in that regard. But I also feel, quoting you from 5 seconds ago, saying how you could have just watched a sitcom of that without any of the superhero stuff. I feel like that is both a major attractor and detractor of the show because it did feel to me like the superhero stuff was a second thought in the show because yeah, there were little bits here and there, but I think one of the detractors was a little bit of a middling plot with the villains of the story, and it felt to me as if the last episode they kind of said, "Oh, right, this is supposed to be a superhero show," and had all of the action and stuff for pretty much the last episode, and maybe episode and a half. That was one of the big detractors for
I
me.
don't disagree with you. However, I will say it felt consistent quality wise, it felt consistent with the other Marvel shows in that regard. I think
Yes.
what set this show a little above was the family dynamic and the cultural insight.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for me it was more of an attractor than a detractor because I don't feel that this show is unique in its lackluster superhero storytelling. I
Hmm.
think a lot of the Marvel shows have felt kind of consistent in that regard. So, this having something extra to make me like it more made me feel that that was much more of a benefit than a negative.
Yeah. why don't we go into our synopsis?
Yeah, so obviously spoilers ahead. All right. Kamal Khan is an average high school student looking forward to Avenger Con. While trying to put together a Captain Marvel costume for a contest at the convention, she finds herself in possession of a magical bracelet. Not knowing of its magic, she inadvertently makes a scene while there, which brings the attention of Damage Control, as well as a group of jinn known as the Clandestines. While avoiding capture from Damage Control, she teams up with the Clandestines, only to learn they believe she is the key to returning them home. Unsure of the consequences, she turns them down, which only leads to violence. To lie low and get away, as well as to learn more about the powers she now has, Kamala and her family travel across the world to visit her extended family in Pakistan. While there, Kamala has an additional run-in with the Clandestines, who manage to open the door between worlds and pay a serious price. Their leader closes it, and in doing so, bestows powers on her son, who back in Jersey City is unable to control his newfound gifts, and also attracts Damage Control. Kamala returns and works with her friends to thwart Damage Control and provide safety to the last remaining clandestine.
Who would you like to talk about first?
Well, let's start where the show starts, which is Kamala's family. I really liked her family. I thought they all felt really unique, really interesting. I thought they all did a great job. I love Happy Go Lucky Brother. Like he's just like so chill about everything. Her dad is it just makes me laugh every time he's on the screen.
He is at times legitimately funny,
Yeah.
which I can't really say much for a lot of sitcom dads because while I do think they lean into the tropes of, the goofy dad, um, it's, as you said before, this is through her perspective.
Yeah.
So we see that side of him because that's what she is most noticing or most taking away,
Yeah, of
maybe. But
course.
you do see, like, later on, you see some more of his serious
Yeah.
nature
Oh
coming out.
yeah, and he has some very sweet moments too,
Oh, yeah.
and emotional moments. I think he did a great job. I love all of her family members. They're probably the best part of the show, and Kamala, but like her whole family all together. I really enjoyed all of them.
They they were a highlight for
Yeah,
me, for sure. This is not going to be the last time we're going to say this, but I would have enjoyed just seeing a family, maybe dramedy
sure.
of theirs, honestly.
Yeah.
I did have one thing, and I am nitpicking. I had one thing that I was a little annoyed about with her parents.
Okay.
And I think it ties more into my problems with Marvel's inconsistency and how they play with that, as opposed to the characters themselves. But in the first episode, Kamala's parents don't let her go to AvengerCon because they're concerned that it's a big party. But then the second episode, they let her go to an actual party. And then by the end, they're okay with her daughter, who has already been shot at. They're okay with her daughter going out and being a superhero. So I just don't see how that quick of a turnaround could happen.
Yeah.
As a new parent myself, and having witnessed my parents parent, um, that that doesn't seem consistent
Yeah.
to me.
So what I'll say about that, and I think there's other kind of characters that play into the end, but I have to say the last episode made me think of the movie Spy Kids. It just felt so surface level. It felt so silly. The villains, especially, were like literally cartoons. And oh, well, the parents are on the side now. She turned them around. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you really should have taken more time to do that. But Disney is like, no, these can be 6 episodes. To me, the issue in the end with her parents just accepting that she's going to be a superhero and just being totally on board with it. It's the writing, not them. Like the writing there is just bad all around. Like it's just like so silly and childish and makes me feel like I'm watching some made for TV movie from the 90s.
Those original Disney Channel movies that you used to tune
Yeah.
into in the 90s.
Yeah, it's just like, oh no,
Yeah.
everything's good now. Like,
Right, right. I know we just had this harrowing life experience and saw our daughter get shot at, but we are totally on board with you being a superhero now. And here is a fancy new costume so that you look great while getting shot
yeah,
at.
the whole last bit is really where it fell apart for me. The first several episodes, I was like, oh, this is like the best Marvel show they've done. But
Hmm.
it just really fell apart for me in the end. But yeah, overall, really love the family. I definitely have problems with the last episode. I agree with you. But I thought every family member felt really well established. They felt really well written for most of the series. The actors were all great. They all played a very different role. You know, a lot of times when the main character is a teenager, one parent is like a really big part, and the other parent just kind of fades into the background because they don't really know what to do with the other one, you know. But they play different parts of her journey, and I think that plays really well.
I do think that the dad faded into the background a little bit, and if they were to have a season two, hopefully he would play a bigger part because he didn't end up going with them to
Yeah,
Pakistan.
true.
And so I thought that was a little unfortunate because I liked the dad, even though he ticked every box on the goofy dad from a sitcom, but he also had some really nice moments, really sweet moments with her.
Yeah, I mean he was a goofy dad and everything, but like he also had heart, you know. It's he wasn't one dimensional. Bruno and Nakia
Hmm.
are like her two main friends, and then that girl Zoe plays a little bit of a role, I guess. She was
Yeah,
forgettable. I don't know why they included her in the end, to be honest. It was silly.
she was only there to bring attention to, I guess, the final act with all of the social media
Yeah,
stuff.
and that's part of what felt so like
Disney.
yes, I could have really done without Zoe. Other than I think that the initial her gaining her powers where she saves Zoe, I thought that was fine. Like that the girl
Yeah.
didn't bother me at that point. It was really just in the end.
Hmm. Yeah, when she saves her life in the first episode, I thought they were going to have a bigger role to play.
Yeah.
Especially when she was starting to call her Nightlight.
Yeah.
I thought she was gonna. I thought that Zoe would have ended up being kind of like Kamala's Lois Lane in the sense that she kind of portrays her story or her background through Zoe's
Sure.
social media presence.
I think they could have done that. I think the friends got the a little bit of the short straw here. Except for Bruno, I
Yeah,
guess. He's in a lot.
he's in more, but they made his strengths early on seem like he was the guy in the chair. He was the tech
Oh
guy,
yeah, yeah.
and he
Thank you
only
for
had a
reminding me
few
of that
moments of that.
because I felt like that's right. My problem with Bruno is I felt like they tried to make him another Ned. It's not as good. I don't know if it's the writing or the acting or both, but he's not as good as Ned. But they basically tried to make him Ned from Spider-Man. And also the concept of a teenager having like this insane intelligence and ability to look at DNA.
Right.
Like, come on,
They
man.
didn't show him doing that. He
No.
just would say
Yeah,
it happened off
he's just
screen.
like, "Oh yeah, I looked at your DNA and this is what I found." And I'm just like, "What?"
Right. And doesn't he say earlier on that he's an orphan and lives alone in that building or
Oh, I don't
something?
remember. Maybe.
Because he does make a mention that he doesn't have
Yeah.
parents because he says Kamala's family is like his
Yeah,
family.
and I think Bruno is at his best when he's interacting with Kamala's family.
Yeah,
And
I
I think
agree.
he like I think his interactions are really cool. It's when they give him the plot points that they give him that I'm like,
Hmm.
this isn't working for me. Like his interactions with Kamala and his interactions with the family, I thought were really good. But then like every time that he had to deliver exposition or move the plot along, I just was like,
Yeah,
and
this is very
and then the
strange.
friend Nakia is like pretty forgettable. I literally had to look up her name.
I forgot it until you said it.
Yeah, I mean she was interesting enough. Like her whole subplot about running for some sort of leadership position in their mosque.
So I had no problem with the subplot and the other subplots that were going on in the story, like the brother getting married, that sort of
Yeah,
things. It made for interesting TV. But in the back of my mind, while all of this stuff was going on, I kept thinking, okay, interesting. When are we going to get back to her being a superhero? When are we going to get back to her origin story? I felt like it was a little distracting, all of these different subplots going on.
yeah. See, those are the things that worked the best for me, though. Like those are the things that I found the most interesting about the show. I don't think they really made the superhero stuff that interesting. And so I liked that the most. I think that if we had a show that was given a true runtime, even half a season, right? Because like from a traditional standpoint, six
Is a
episodes
miniseries.
is barely.
Going into the show, I looked up how many episodes there are. Is there going to be season two? And I saw that the answers were 6 episodes, no season two. She's going to show up in the Marvels movie. And so, as every episode went by, I felt like time was becoming an issue. I felt there wasn't enough time to tell her origin story with all of these other subplots that they're not going to wrap up.
Yeah, they're not structured like a movie. They're not structured like a television show. They're too long for a movie, too short for a show. It's just this awkward stage, and I feel like there's so much that feels underdeveloped and so much that falls by the wayside. They usually do like one thing pretty solid, and everything else is just like it just feels lackluster, and I'm just getting sick of these 6 episode series. Like if you want to make a season that is quality, you need at least 9 episodes.
Yeah, one of my major things lately in life has been if you're going to give any criticism or any praise for something, make it useful and constructive. So if you're going to praise someone, don't just say, "Oh yeah, it's really good, it's really awesome." Give them something constructive to work off of. It's really awesome when you do this. If you don't like something, give them constructive criticism. I don't like it because of this. Maybe you could do this instead. So I really liked about this show the whole cultural deep dive, but
Yeah,
but needs to be longer and they need to fully develop their characters. Every plot line that they fill out, they need to fully develop that. And I don't feel that they gave ample enough time to Nakia running,
they didn't.
and I don't feel that they gave ample time to Bruno for any of his off-screen things.
They didn't give ample time to the brother's wedding. I mean,
I don't think they gave enough for that. They had a lot of that. It was more of the wedding for the first 3 episodes, I want to say. There was a lot of talk and
they talked about them being engaged, but then like all of a sudden it was the wedding.
right,
Like
right. It was
it was just all of a sudden the wedding.
it was very
There was
fast.
no real lead up. It didn't feel like, oh yeah, the wedding is just around the corner. The wedding is tomorrow. The wedding is, no. It was just like, oh yeah, they're engaged.
Mm-hmm.
2 episodes later, here's the wedding.
By the third episode is when I started to feel, as I've said, that time crunch. I knew that we were already halfway through the season, and I kept thinking to myself, how are we wrapping this up? Where are we going, guys? Where are we going?
Yeah, yeah, and even knowing that there's 6 episodes, you get that in your head too while you watch
Right,
it. You're just like, wait,
right.
there's only like 2 episodes left. What's happening? You haven't set up anything here. I liked their introduction. Like I found it interesting that like it provided a nice and very high schooly but nice story mechanic where like, oh, here's this cute boy she likes. Oh, he's the son of Jin and they want to go home and that might be dangerous.
Kamran?
Yeah. Him and his mother did a good job. And every other clandestine I could not pick out of a lineup.
They were decent actors, yes, but I think that they were horribly
Oh
underutilized.
yeah.
And again, I feel like the writing failed them.
For sure. I thought they did a good job with what they had, but they didn't really have a whole lot. And all of the other Jin, literally, I cannot tell you what they even look like. I don't remember.
Like you said, they were forgettable. We had talked about this previously in our boys episode, but I saw more of this kind of roller coaster of them powering up and depowering these guys throughout the show. So when you first have that first fight scene with Kamala versus the Jinn slash Clandestines, they're super powerful, and somehow she survives, which I we'll talk about later. But they're super powerful, and she barely escapes with her life and with that those of her friends. And then by the and she's a superpowered individual, and then by the end, they're having trouble with a regular Joe getting knocked out and dragged out by random people, a kid from the Red Dagger Society or whatever. And it just it that seeing that roller coaster, they're super powerful, they're depowered, they were able to jump through a building with no equipment and land on their feet normally, no injury taken, to getting knocked around by a regular person who wasn't superpowered at all didn't make sense to me.
It's bad writing, it's bad planning. Um, and I don't know if it's necessarily even the writer's fault or like they have certain requirements placed on them and they don't have the resources or whatnot, because like if it's the same writer that handled all of those family moments, I'm like, no, this is a good writer. So obviously there's something happening here, right?
Mm-hmm.
There could be other reasons that this writing is bad other than the writer. Because if it's the same person who wrote all those great scenes between Kamala and her family, maybe it's just there's some expectation or requirement placed on them by Disney or Marvel that they're just not given either the time or resources or support needed to be successful in those elements. I don't know how much this is done on the Disney shows, like the Marvel Disney shows, but I know in the movies, a lot of the action sequences can often be planned long before they even have people really assigned to the project. Especially with like anything like visual effects, they'll have to make sure that that's being worked on way in advance because it takes so long. And it's like, maybe these are just things that like they were told, yeah, this has to be in your show.
If that's the case, then that's a
It
shame.
is. And I'm not saying it is the case. I'm just saying there's a million reasons that it could be what it is, but I agree with you that what it is lackluster in that regard.
And I feel like if it's a time management thing, it's only going to keep getting worse because we are very much a culture of we want it and we want it yesterday.
Sure. This is pure speculation. I'm not saying that this is definitely what happened, but it just doesn't make sense to me that the same person who wrote some of those awesome, funny, and touching scenes between Kamala and her family also wrote these sloppy action sequences. Unless they're just bad at action sequences. I don't know.
So going back to the clandestines and the Jinn,
Yeah.
another qualm that I had with them was Rajma. She seemed to snap really quickly from, hey, your family, you go ahead and think about helping us. We've waited thousands of years. What's another day or two? We'll talk in a little bit. To very quickly saying, yeah, you know what? We're just going to kill you and take your bangle.
Again, this is a issue with we've said this a million times, so I don't want to like just harp on it over and over and over again. We talked about it in our Obi-Wan episode. We will probably talk about it again whenever the next Marvel show comes out. um it's just this is a symptom of the issue of only having 6 episodes. We have no time for development. So although I like the idea of this woman manipulating Kamala and then and then turning on her with a vengeance when Kamala shuts her down. But instead of handling that in 30 minutes, that should be handled over a couple episodes.
Right.
And I think the turn at the end, right, where she goes from like we're getting home, and then all of a sudden she's like, I will sacrifice myself, which I didn't completely understand how she even did that or knew how to do it, but
Right. Again, they just didn't have time to go through all that. And
yeah,
another thing that I didn't understand about that was how she somehow transferred her powers all the way from Pakistan to Jersey City to her son.
yeah,
And then he was able to use the powers without the focus of a bangle was
yeah,
interesting to me as well. With given her personality of I will do anything it takes to get home, if she knew about an ability like that, that if somebody dies, their powers could be transferred to somebody and they would have the same powers and could open a rift, she would have definitely sacrificed one of those other clandestine in a
yeah.
heartbeat.
Yeah, it's all just they don't have the time to tell a real story here. They're
Yeah.
just rushing through a bunch of plot points. So damage control. Now, I had the most issue with damage control. And this is where I really felt like I was watching Spy Kids. With the exception of the one guy from Damage Control who's been in a couple other Marvel properties.
Oh, has he? I thought I recognized him from somewhere.
Yeah, he's played this role before. Isn't he the guy that's interrogating everyone in Spider-Man: No Way Home? And he's been in Marvel stuff before that.
You're right. It is that guy.
Yeah, so I thought he was great, but every other damage control person was a cartoon,
Yes.
like an absolute cartoon.
Right.
Like the whole, the woman and like all of the like racist stuff going on took a very serious, very real topic and just made them seem like a cartoon. They didn't even seem like real people. They didn't even seem like real people that you hate. Like, no, they just seemed unreal. It
Yes.
felt like I was watching Spy Kids or some Disney Channel original movie.
It was very disconnecting.
It it was so silly and just not genuine to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was the writing or the acting or a combination, but I definitely think acting played a part. Like I don't think she did a good job. I don't know what else she's been in, and maybe she's been in other things, or maybe she just didn't. Maybe she just didn't understand what she was in, or like she just hammed it up and not in a good way.
Once all the crowd of people started coming and congregating in front of the school,
Oh, her cartooniness dialed up to 11.
yeah, and she sends in the agents anyways in front of all these people, and I knew they were going to do this, and I am telling you the truth when I tell you I knew where they were headed, and I tapped on the screen because I was watching on my phone. I tapped on the screen to see how much time we had left because if it was more than I wanted to watch, I wasn't going to watch it. I knew they were heading towards this final thing where the agents were going to come face to face with the crowd of people who were going to protect Kamala.
Yeah,
And then when they left, the people were going to cheer. I
yeah.
knew that was going to happen because it was so Disney.
It was so silly and so ridiculous. Yeah, the last two episodes of the show really lost me quite a bit.
Yeah.
It actually took me a while to watch the last episode after it came out. Like I didn't watch it right away. All the other episodes I watched right away. The last one I waited like a week and a half.
Okay, so Kamala.
I thought this girl carried the show very well. She did a very good job. I really thought that she managed to balance the humor and the serious moments. And I don't think there was ever really a moment where I ever cringed when she was talking. And there were moments where I cringed in this show.
So I differ a little bit from you on that point. I love the geeky, kind of outcast, kind of dopey, quirky superhero trope. I like it. It works for me. And the stylistic way that the world was painted in her point of view, the text messages showing up in neon. Yeah, yeah, really cool. I like that. I really enjoyed that. There were a couple moments that really made me cringe, though, and they directly involve her. First one being in the last episode, and I think this is where most of our problems reside. In the last episode, Cameron kind of confronts her and says, "What happened to my mother?" And she says, I stopped her." And I had to pause and say to myself, "No, you didn't. You didn't do that. Why are you taking credit for that?" Like you've been tripping your way through this whole superhero thing this whole season. You didn't do that.
I will say I wasn't a huge fan of how they handled that specifically. I felt, again, it was very Disneyfied. It was very like
Right. They squandered a scene for her to be a hero.
the death happened on screen,
Mm-hmm.
but yet they can't even say like, "Oh, she died." Like you can't even allude to her dying. He deserves the truth, and she should have said something that was a little bit more direct. The whole part, I was just like, this is awkward. But I didn't feel like I was cringing at Kamala. I felt like I was cringing at the writing there. And I was cool with the powers. Like I thought it was interesting. I
Yeah.
understand that they wanted to not do the stretchy powers, which is what she has in the comics.
Right. Make them more
Um,
cosmic.
make it more cosmic so it's more similar to Captain Marvel because you're going to link those characters. Also, everyone associates those powers with Mr. Fantastic,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to save that for the Fantastic Four stuff. It's probably also easier to make, like, from a visual effects standpoint, it's definitely easier to make these like light structures that don't have any real world parallel than to try and make convincing looking stretch effects.
Yeah. Speaking on the effects, though, I was a tiny bit disappointed that given Kamala's established, and they do this throughout the season, they establish that she is very creative. So given that Kamala's established creativity doesn't show up in her powers, she makes little platforms, she makes big fists, and then she does the embiggen thing at the end.
I think the reason for that is they wanted to give some element or elements of the original power set within these cosmic abilities. But I agree with you. I think it does make more logical sense for her to be a lot more creative with them, and maybe we will see that in the future.
Yeah,
I always
maybe.
appreciate when you give a certain power and then they figure out creative ways to use those powers instead of just being very bland.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of the powers, or I should say, going off of the powers, the bangle being the focus that she used.
Hmm.
Maybe you have a better idea of what happened here. What was the deal at the end? Did she turn into Captain Marvel? Did she transform into Captain Marvel or just summon her to that universe?
I feel like they switched places.
Okay.
Like wherever Captain Marvel was, now Kamala is, and vice versa.
Hmm.
And I think that's obviously what they're going to be dealing with in the Marvels.
Yeah, the bangle just seems to be a very unique storytelling device so far.
Yeah, sure. It just does what it needs to do in the moment,
Yeah.
narratively speaking.
Yeah, if they make a season two, I'll probably watch it, but more for the family dynamics than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. They were by far the best part.
So, next episode, we're going to talk Comic-Con and our thoughts and excitement for everything that was introduced there, or at least the things that stuck out to us.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of great stuff, some surprises, some things that I was kind of meh on, and yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that.
Yeah, so that'll be next week. That's all for today's episode. Please subscribe, follow, and leave a review on whatever podcasting medium you use. And please check out our YouTube channel for additional content. Join us next week, and thank you for listening to Age of the Geek.